Good morning all, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Esme and I'm going to be hosting the conference today. So we'll hear more from Lee Holloway, our Chief Executive, in a minute. But firstly, I just wanted to welcome everyone and to give you some further insight into what to expect from the day. So hopefully you should have received the PDF program with your joining instructions, and you'll see it's quite a filled day, a busy day, where we're going to be exploring the challenges that the 50+ cohort of service leavers, exploring the challenges you face as you seek new careers. So these have been highlighted as pitching yourself at the right level, articulating your value, looking at career confidence and the perceived lack of commercial experience. So today we'll help you to overcome these, equipping you with the latest market insights and updates, and you'll be able to hear firsthand from employers who are actively seeking your skill set and your experiences. So Lee, I'll hand over to you to further set the scene, and then we'll kick off our presentations.
Thank you, Esme. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to what is our second flagship 50+ online employment event, which is run by the Officers Association. We're running this event because we've now been involved for several years in developing research associated with employment outcomes for the over 50 cohort. Alongside Forces in My Trust and the Centre for Research into the Older Workforce, research shows that the over 50s are one age group consistently stands out as experiencing increased difficulties in moving from military to civilian employment. And while there is a growing body of evidence testifying to the barriers that can face all veterans seeking employment, more needs to be done to promote the needs of older service leavers. Our involvement in the research and running employment events like these adds to the recent momentum gained in the profile of veterans in society, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlighted the skills of veterans. Today, we have a range of speakers with us from industry, and in particular, I'd like to welcome Kate Shoesmith, the Deputy CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, to today's event. Kate will provide an overview on the current jobs market and the growing interest in the 50+ skill set. As an employment charity, we, the Officers Association, are here to provide tri-service quality employment support to all officers and their dependents. To access this support, you must register with us, and you can do this through the jobs board, the online content, our experienced career consultants, and by attending employment events like this. Just after the new year, we'll also be launching our OA membership offering. The purpose of which is to further enhance our career services to you. And that's now and it's in the future. Now, this move is in response to a growing body of officers interested in membership and its associated benefits, thus allowing us to create a through-life community which you can connect with anytime you need it. And more details will follow on our membership offering in the new year. Finally, as a military charity, we receive no government funding, and we rely on our work with employers and stakeholders continue to offer our services, and that's right across the officer community. Any income we do receive go directly to helping officers and their families through life, especially when times are tough. We have officers who donate to our charity after an event or by annual standing order, and we're grateful for this. If you'd like to donate, there will be information on how to do so during the event. So I hope you enjoy the day. I hope you enjoy the event itself and gain a great deal from it. So I'll hand now back to you, Esme. Thank you very much.
Fabulous, thank you, Lee. I can see 2 of our 3 panelists are in, so I suggest we start with introductions. Stuart and Matt, if you'd like to come on to camera, that would be fantastic. Hopefully Louise can join us in a minute or 2. So Stuart, could we start with you? If you could just introduce yourself, a bit about your military background and more importantly, what you're doing now.
Yes, sure, Esme. So, hi, everyone. I spent 20 years as a soldier, then followed by 10 years as a global head at Barclays, running their security department. Perhaps of interest was, while I was there, we set up the Barclays After program, which helped 600 ex-military move into the bank to develop careers there. And we also set up an associate program with other companies called VETS, which also brought in about 1,600 people to our partner companies, and there are about 100 of those. And since then, I set up my own business change consultancy called Matero, which I've been running for about the last 2 years.
Fabulous, thank you. And Matt, you have a very different background, so if we could have your introduction, please.
Oh, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have a military background myself. I am the director of the Center for Research into the Older Workforce. I worked with the Officers Association and the Forces Employment Charity last year on a report for Forces in Mind Trust on the experiences of 50-plus service leavers in the civilian job market. And I'm just now starting a new project for ESRC's Healthy Aging Catalyst fund to build on from the report. So I'll be working with colleagues in the OA and Forces Employment Charity to develop some tools for 50-plus service leavers as they look for civilian jobs.
Fantastic, thank you. So unfortunately, we don't have Louise with us yet. So I suggest we jump straight into questions. And then when Louise joins, she can jump in as well. So as people registered for the event, we asked them what their most common concerns were as they looked to secure a new career. And quite a few of the same kind of challenges came up. So specifically age, perceived lack of commercial experience, and also translating their skills into a way that new civilian employers can understand. So from your perspectives, Matt and Stuart, which other challenges do you see this cohort of job seekers facing? And what's your advice for maybe overcoming them? Stuart, should we start with you?
So all those challenges, less age, I think are experienced by anyone leaving the military. Where I think there is a differentiation in generations is often around expectation management. So someone who's spent a full career in the military as an officer, leaving in their mid-50s, often has an expectation that they're going to move into a similarly positioned job in terms of span of responsibility. And that becomes a challenge in itself. And if you reverse engineer it, and I remember being at a ECAB, Executive Committee of the Army Board dinner with Barclays senior executives, and we talked about secondments between the Army and the bank. And it was quite interesting because the general sitting in the room sort of put these caveats on and said, well, you know, obviously we wouldn't allow people from the bank to run certain functions or support certain functions in the military. But of course, the converse is absolutely true with someone coming to the military into a commercial environment. And if you think about it, that even if you've run a large department, a unit, an air station, a ship, or whatever it might be in the military, no one's going to bring you in to run their derivatives trading floor or to become the chief operating officer of a whole of an NHS trust, for example, not as a starting point. So I think it's really important to recognize that when you're leaving the military, you need to think about where your entry point is, because you might go in perhaps at a lower salary than you want, but if you really then adjust, and that's really important, into the new organization, gain that commercial experience, understand how to navigate the way the new organization works, new to you, the politics, the rhythm and the heartbeat, then if you work incredibly hard and learn very quickly, you can then catch the selector's eye, and someone perhaps in their mid-50s with a good sort of 15, maybe 20 years career ahead of them can then begin to promote within the organization. And I think that's a really important, almost psychological and philosophical approach to think about that the lateral hire and probably commanding a salary that you're used to in the military is not something that is readily going to come immediately in most circumstances.
Thank you. And Stuart, you and I talked a few days ago about rank and leaving rank behind. How much of a challenge or just a hindrance do you think this is for job seekers?
Well, it depends on the individual, but it's massively important to leave your rank behind you. And I've seen some very senior people come into corporate organizations and struggle with this concept, because it's particularly if you, well, even if you've been a lieutenant colonel or a commander or even a wing commander, or if you have starred rank, when you move into a corporate organization, the structure is very different, much flatter, and people are different, and the way you lead them has to change. You will not gain instant respect and people working with you in the way you would like just because you have a particular rank on your sleeve or your shoulder. And that's quite a shock to people when they move into an organization. I mean, I was very fortunate. I left the army as a full colonel, but I went into a corporate organization aged as a 41-year-old, having commanded a battle group. And it was a real shock that suddenly people didn't do what I said. There wasn't that instant respect. There wasn't necessarily that trust. I didn't come in with a background or a reputation that was particularly recognized. And I had to go out and earn all that respect and trust, and in a way, probably treat people very differently because they treated me very differently. There wasn't that instant status and position. And it's something you have to earn. And I've definitely seen more senior officers sometimes struggle with that. And it's to their detriment when they do so.
Thank you, Stuart. That's really interesting. I can see that Louise has been able to join us. Hi, Louise. If you could just jump on camera and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Good morning, Esme. Thank you. And so sorry I'm late. My name is Louise Chaplin. I'm head of the board practice at Eton Bridge Partners. We support senior execs in moving from roles and also support clients globally in terms of hiring C-suite individuals. We work across all elements of the corporate leadership team, from CFO and finance all the way across to HR, with sales, marketing, communications sort of sitting in the middle. Hope that's enough of an intro for this stage.
That's brilliant, thank you. So we were just discussing the challenges that the 50+ cohort faces as they seek new careers. So Matt, I wondered if you had anything to add to Stuart's answer about what does the research say? What are the most common challenges that you found?
We did some qualitative research, some workshops with 50+ service leavers, followed by a survey. And some of the things that came out of the research was quite common experiences with both ageism and some anti-military bias. When you talk to employers, they have very positive things to say about people leaving the military, but you also have some misperceptions of the skills and what 50+ service leavers have to offer civilian employers. So, for example, one of the common themes was a lot of service leavers talked about being considered, quote unquote, too regimented for civilian employers. That was the feedback that they were getting. And when I talked to them about their experiences in the military, they said, well, actually, military experience requires you to be flexible, to work in situations in which you have very limited information, limited data, but still have to make decisions. And these are skills which civilian employers could greatly benefit from. Stuart made a great point when it comes to holding on to rank and where you come into an organization. But then there's another side of the equation, which is skills and how you use those skills, especially in the first job that you have. And we've been doing some more analysis of the survey data. And there were some interesting things that came out of that in terms of how 50+ service users use the skills in terms of getting their first jobs. And people who say that their first job underutilized the skills that they had were more likely to say that they were dissatisfied with their job now than those who got into a job which made good use of their skills. Now, this could be a case of, as Stuart said, finding an employer that you want to build your civilian career with, and using those skills to move up the ranks within that organization. But if you get into a job which is the first job which is available, it might take a little bit longer for you to get into the kind of career that you want to be in. So the message coming from that is having a good plan. before you leave the military, of a roadmap of where you want to be in terms of your civilian career.
Thank you, Matt. And Louise, maybe flipping this question around, from your experience, what are the challenges that employers and businesses are facing when they're trying to recruit at this more senior level? You know, what do you think their ideal candidates really look like?
Yes, I think it's that the ideal candidate, and we always get challenged by that when we are engaged by organisations to find the perfect, what I call the unicorn. And there is never that perfect candidate. There is always compromises to be made, and there is always flex within the process to understand what the candidate pool is like when you're searching for, perhaps it's a CEO or COO, and adapting to that candidate pool at the time. I think from a service leaver perspective and a senior service leaver perspective, I think there is huge added value that comes from the gravitas, expertise and experience of the years of service. And it's trying to make sure that that is understood from a client side, and also but being adaptable. And as Stuart was saying, being adaptable to understand the parameters of the commercial world against service life. And I think it's making sure that you are engaging at the right level with them, understanding their business and making use of your network. I think the network is very powerful in terms of supporting you and making sure you're having that right engagement level in the process.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you. And building on that, Stuart, could you maybe pick out some of the key skills and experiences and values that the employers are looking for at this more senior level? And do you personally think they align with a military career?
I mean, the first point I'd make is they absolutely align, but it's how you translate them in a way that resonates with a potential employer. And Louise said two really important things about understanding the potential workspace you might be going into and also networking. And when it comes back to trying to translate those skills in a way that makes sense to an employer, one of the things that I think job candidates have to do is really understand an organization. See if you can get time with a particular organization or a similar organization using your network, whether that's attending look at life events, going out and having cups of coffee with people and asking them questions, you know, how does your department operate? What are your challenges? And then you'll begin to deduce how you have relevant skill sets, and they will be about leadership, but that's flat leadership. That's about motivating people as a team to deliver a particular objective, excuse me, or a vision. So it's really about service leadership. And someone made a really great point on the chat net that it's not about being important, it's about doing important things. So how you apply your leadership skills, how you communicate. Military people are great complex problem solvers. They're pretty ambidextrous in many ways, that they move around lots of different jobs in different locations, and they need to bring that out. The flexibility, the fact that they have a very strong culture of being can-do and getting things done. And it's a real sense of presenting yourself. And this is really important, I think, to the older generation. Remember that really sparky grade SO2 staff officer you once were, probably as a major, possibly as a captain. That's what you need to promote to the organization, that you're going to roll your sleeves up, you're going to fit, you're going to understand, you're going to make a difference. That's really important at whatever level that you do that at. And then Louise also mentioned the importance of networking. And I think networking is absolutely key, but there are probably 3 rules to think about networking. First of all, have your pitch when you walk into any networking opportunity. This is who I am. This is where I am in my journey. This is what I'm looking for. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. This is what I would like from you. Some advice and some connections. Secondly, ask for really brutally honest feedback. How do I come across? Where do you see my strengths and my weaknesses? And then learn from those, because that will help you begin to adapt to make that fit to a commercial organization. And then thirdly, ask for who else could I go and see? And I think you continually begin to learn and change. And I went through a 10-hour interview process to sort of get my job. And I remember at the end of it, I thought, well, gosh, if I'd have just done this interview process, was that networking really necessary? And 6, probably maybe certainly 4 months of networking probably got me the job. And it got me the job because I learned things about myself. And I think in the military, we can be a bit overly defensive sometimes, particularly as we get more senior. But when someone turns around and says, Stuart, you came across not particularly strongly there, or you weren't very clear about this point, or the point you just mentioned, great, why is it not on your CV? Why aren't you building a story around that? So I think taking sort of networking, taking investigation and research, and the harder you work, the luckier you get, and then also remembering that you are trying to sell yourself as that young, dynamic staff officer, grade 2 officer you once were. That will catch the selector's eye, particularly if you can translate skill sets which have a relevance, and there are many of them, to the commercial world.
Thank you. Matt, did you have anything to add there about the value that service leavers and veterans, particularly in this age category, bring to business?
One of the things that came out of the workshop discussions in particular was the degree to which service leavers stick with or move away from their military identity and community. You have some people who move very quickly away from that because they recognize that within the industries that they want to get into, that there would be either negative perceptions or lack of understanding of military skills. So they try to run, a million miles away very quickly. But you also have people who build on their military experience and the networks that they have within the military to get access to the people that they need to talk to in order to secure the kind of job that they want. So best practice organizations, for example, those who are members of the Armed Forces Covenant, often offer a mentor who has some military experience in helping people segue from a military career to a civilian one. So the language which is used within the industries that they want to get into, how they pitch the skills that they have, so that it's something which resonates with employers. Employers can see how they can benefit from those skills. Also using resources which are available in the military. You have a lot of people who stay as reservists so that they can get access to training and networks and career development opportunities and so forth through the military to help them build their civilian career. So getting that balance right is often a very important ingredient in terms of having a successful civilian career.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks to those in the audience who are submitting their questions. We've had a couple of great ones, so please do keep them coming. We've had a question from Adi saying, is the age barrier something that manifests at application, or is it a bias that kicks in later, such as at interview? Stuart, Louise, would you like to jump in for this one?
Shall I go first, Stuart?
Yeah, do please, sorry.
So I think it's a really interesting one, and of course there's going to be an element of bias. When you are going for a C-suite opportunity, which as senior leaders coming out, you are likely to be going to a senior level in an organization. I would say, of course, you've got years of experience. So, and that's what they are attracted by. They're attracted by your expertise and your experience and your skill set. So your peer group, when you are going through that process, is likely to be of a similar age group, perhaps within the broadest realms of 5 years, 10 years. But I do think that you should put yourself in the quantum of it is that you are sitting in a pool of experienced individuals when you're going for a role. And I think that should be celebrated, not hidden. And obviously, in terms of at the CV stage or at the face-to-face stage, you are what you are ultimately. you've got your experience, you can't change that, and you've got to go with that. So I think it's understanding, and if there is that challenge around what we call stage of career, from a client side, is that the right organization for you going forward as well? So I think it works both ways, and I think it's really important for you to be true to yourself. And if you're getting challenges there, I would suggest perhaps it's not the right organization, and you should be looking at other organizations that will embrace your skill set and experience.
Thank you, Stuart. Is there anything that you would add to that?
Well, I'd agree with everything that Louise said. And in terms of, it does start to some extent at the CV point of departure. As Louise said, I don't think you can hide that. That's just a fact of life. But if someone's going to reject you because they think you're too old, then it's probably not an organization you want to work in. But it's what you say in your CV that's really important. You know, getting across and why the profile, and I think the two really important things in the CV is a profile that tells the CV reader who you are, capturing that experience, depth of leadership, and then bring out your key achievements, what you've done. So a commercial or a line manager hiring someone will recognize this person has led teams of 100 people. This person has led projects of this size. So how you craft your CV to catch the selector's eye is really important, because then they're less concerned about age. They're more concerned about experience and skill sets. And then when you get to that interview, it comes back to, you've got to be energetic. You've got to have done your research. You've got to roll your sleeves up. You've got to show them that you are significantly more attractive in terms of your skills and experience and your character and your values than the last 3 or 4 people they've just seen. And so walking in, and that requires a degree of sense of purpose, a degree of confidence. But if you've done your networking, you've done your research, and you'll be much better set to be successful in that sort of interview. And, you know, you've got to put your best foot forward, and you'll do that and be more successful if you've done that networking, if you've done that research. You will feel a degree of comfort and confidence, but only if you've done the prior reconnaissance. And that's really, really important.
Thank you. Matt, a question for you. You mentioned different stereotypes earlier, and someone's just asking if you could maybe go into a bit more detail there. So the negative and the positive stereotypes that employers in particular have about service leavers in this age group. You know, what impact is this having, and how can people in the audience avoid these stereotypes?
We asked service leavers if they had any experiences with ageism or anti-military bias, and about 4 in 10 said that they did. And most of the time it was the two together. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of overlapping perceptions of people with military experience and older workers. There's also a disadvantage for 50+ service leavers because you're coming into a new industry. And a lot of people on the call today probably have some experience with this, where you're up against a number of candidates who come from the same sector as the employer where you're applying for the job. And although you have something to offer the organization, and you might have a unique set of skills which could benefit the organization in a particular way, the pattern of the skills that the employer wants might be more reflected in some of the other candidates because they come from they come from the same sector. And that then reinforces some of the biases which employers have, not based on experiences, but just based on perception. So, for example, being quote unquote too regimented. This is something that older workers in general often face, especially when they're trying to build a new career in a new industry. You know, the experience, the skills that they have from their previous careers aren't readily as neat a fit into the job as other candidates, and then employers sort of fall back on the perceptions that they have. One of the most interesting conversations that I've had with 50+ service leavers is around the issue of the guaranteed job interview. And the idea behind that is that if you check all of the boxes when it comes to the essential criteria for the job, you should at least be able to have a conversation with the person who's interviewing for the job, so that you can show that the skills that you get from the military, how they could be applied to the organization. Some people didn't really like this idea because they saw this as giving them an advantage over other candidates, while others said, well, listen, we realize the fact that that we're up against a number of candidates who come from the same industry. They can more easily articulate how their CV might fit within this job. I've got something that I can offer the employer, but I need to have that conversation with the person who's interviewing for the job, so that I can demonstrate how my military skills could benefit the organization. So networking is important. Having conversations within the organization is important, because there's this sort of challenge of showing what you have to offer the organization.
Excellent, thank you. And we've had a fantastic question come through from Andrew, who said, Stuart, you wisely advise us to set our expectations appropriately for the entry point into an organisation. However, you might then be interviewed by someone senior who might feel threatened by you. How do you meet that challenge?
Well, it is a challenge, and it's something I've definitely faced in the bank, and it took me a while to work it out, actually, that you think, hang on, I'm a good guy, I'm trying to learn here, and yet, I'm seeming to get a degree of resistance in some places. And what I discovered was it was really important to disarm the person you're talking to, that they'll have this view that you're X and you've done this, and you might be quite intimidating, and you will have a depth of leadership training experience which will be often significantly greater than the person talking to you, and particularly if they're younger than you as well. So it's about disarming people. It's about being self-effacing. It's about recognizing that there's a lot to learn, that you would like to partner with them and understand from them and take their guidance, and you're on a journey of exploration, while also softly getting those core skill sets that you've got, the culture and values, listening to people, working in flat structures, working collaboratively, working as a team. That becomes really important. And the emphasis on we and team will do, I think, a lot to disarm people, because people are then quite surprised that just how flat, when it works well in the military, and I'm talking particularly in a challenging environment, whether that's extraction from Kabul or a combat situation, or perhaps a ship in a very stormy sea, you rely on your crew and the people around you. And again, it comes to this service leadership. So more emphasis on team, working together, rolling your sleeves up, resonates with people. And the most challenging job interview I had in this series of interviews was with a lady in the bank who's now a great friend of mine, who was really challenging. She says, well, why do you think you can bring something here? The military is all about privilege and structure and that type of thing. So, and I could have bristled at that. And if I'm honest, I felt a bit bristly, but I knew that it wouldn't really serve my purposes. So I talked her through the flat structures, the listening to people, working together, and all of those things. And she ended up giving me the strongest recommendation for the job by the end of it. And we were laughing and joking by the time the interview finished, but it didn't start like that. It was almost potentially a bit frosty. So I think that's the disarming bit, and breaking that perception. And Richard Carter asked a question about that you have to break this perception, and Matt said it as well, about being regimented, about the command and control, that you are the commanding officer and what you say goes, that actually it's a far more collaborative environment which is conducive for getting things done. And that's the environment that you come from, working together with people, learning from them, harnessing their diversity of thought. Really important to get those points across if you can.
An excellent answer. Thank you, Stuart. Louise, maybe we can go to you for this next question. Stuart mentioned it briefly, but we've had a comment come in from Richard. So be yourself. But is there any language or culture which should be toned down? Is there anything further that you would add to Stuart's answer?
I think in terms of from a cultural perspective, I think you've always got to be agile in your approach in an interview and use the mirroring techniques. So, you know, you've got to be aware of your environment and the fact that the commercial environment is slightly different. So, you know, stay away from the TLAs, from the acronyms that perhaps and the thinking about local examples that will be very familiar to you, but perhaps you need to now reflect them in terms of how would that work in a leadership structure within a corporate environment. So I think it's making your experiences very relevant and making your language relevant to them. Because if you talk about in military terms about operations in Kabul, they won't necessarily, they can't relate to that. You've got to be relatable, and you've got to mirror from an interview perspective their lead in the interview structure. And I think, but ultimately you do have to be true to yourself and who you are, because they're hiring you for the long term. They're not hiring you just on that interview and for the next stage. So you've got to be yourself, but you've also got to remember you've got to be agile in this environment. And I think just going back to one of the comments that Stuart made around the what do the employers see from from your perspective, and he talked around the diversity of thinking, working in a flat structure. And I also think there's a key element around agility. Agility, if you think about your career to date, you have moved and done different roles, worked with different teams every 2 to 3 years, or sometimes shorter, every 18 months. Your agility to be able to settle into a new environment is one of the key value propositions you bring. You have settled into different environments, ultimately within the same structure, but they're still different units, different headquarters. Try and think of those threads of your agility throughout your career and share them in a way that is understandable and digestible by your audience.
Esme, can I just add a point to something Louise said, which is really important, and that's the agility in interviewing. And mimicking the person interviewing you is really important. Yeah. So leaning in when they're leaning in, leaning back, straight away you'll get a degree of empathy going. And then crucially, to another point that Louise made, bridge the relevance of your experience to something that pertains to that organization. So you're absolutely right. Talking in detail about Kabul won't necessarily resonate unless you make it relevant about this was a really agile response. We had to move very fast. We had to bring our people together. Very interesting, because I've done a lot of research about how companies pivoted to working from home and now returning to work. And I think there was quite a lot of similarities in approach of how you harness people together, give them a sense of clear purpose of what they're doing. And you're making your military experience, which might be the only experience you have, relevant by benching it against research you've done on the challenges companies generally have been facing, and particularly challenges specifically relevant to the organization you're talking to, because it also shows that you're smart and you're agile as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you to all of our panelists for your insights and for your advice today. Before I close the panel, I'm going to put you each on the spot and just ask for a final word of advice or a top tip that you would give the audience today. So Matt, let's start with you.
Well, the last thing I would say, I don't want to repeat a lot of the things that have already been talked about, but I think the last point would be to be sure to pay it forward. So once you do have that successful career, you're on the pathway, and you find somebody else who's in a similar situation as you're in now, be sure to help them in the way that that you've been helped from the military community.
Thank you. Louise?
I think it's, as Stuart's mentioned a couple of times, it's be specific and relevant in your discussions. Interestingly, I had some feedback from a connection I made to a senior leader in a professional consultancy yesterday, and he said the individual was a bit unsure about his journey, and he needs to understand 3 different options. So be quite relevant and specific. If you get the chance to meet with a senior leader, even if it's a speculative, say, look, I'm moving back. This is my plan. It could change, but try and give yourself some specific milestones and really think about what is it that you want, so that you are very relevant to them, and then they can make sure they're pointing you in the right direction for their network as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Stuart?
Yeah, very straightforward. Time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted, and the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Fantastic advice from everyone today. Thank you. Lee, our chief exec, I can see you have your hand up. Did you want to add something to the panel?
Somebody switched off my video, so sorry about that. Just to referring to Matt's comment about paying it forward. Any officer or the dependent that come through us, we would look to you to join the network, and we have a very, very tight. Probably now, because we've refined it, about 300 people who are there available to anybody that registered with the OA to just phone them and say, how do I get into your sector? What do I do? What's your experience? Have you any advice? And we would look to you becoming part of that very, very tight network of people that can help those to follow you. And that's how we're going to build this community. And the advice they've got, the experience they've got, can be quite compelling. We all go to different sectors. My sector with the aerospace sector, I think Stuart's with the banking sector, and a part within banking, so he knows a lot about banking. So a lot of experience, and paying it forward is rewarding for you, but it's rewarding for those to follow you. Once an officer, always an officer, and you've looked after people when you're in the military, and I think we should continue to do so outside of the military. So thank you for that point, Matt.
Excellent, thanks Lee, and obviously ties in nicely with both Stuart and Louise's points about the importance of networking and reaching out to your network. So definitely recommend everyone getting involved in the network contact list if you're not already. And just to highlight again today, all of our speakers have actually given up their time for free. So thank you, Stuart, Matt and Louise, for joining us. I will let you all go as we have another exciting presentation up next. Thanks all.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to meet everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you.